Before we get started, a few notes on the GoToWebinar application. Sometimes you can wind up with either the application showing my screen, either zoomed in if mine's much larger than your screen, or vice versa where it's kind of smashed down too small to see. So if you need to control the zoom, there are some options in the upper left-hand corner right near the webcam button. So you can click the zoom button to either fit to screen, 100%, 200%. As far as questions, if you have any questions, just type them in the GoToWebinar control panel. There's an area where you can type questions towards the bottom. If anything very important comes up during the, particularly relevant to something I'm discussing comes up during the presentation, I may pause to address that point. Otherwise, we will be doing a Q&A at the end to address any of those other questions. So, without further ado, today's webinar is about the ES Flatplan. For those of you who aren't as familiar with the ES Flatplan, what it is basically a way of dealing with paginating work, or essentially having a storyboard to work with within ES for book or magazine content. It's used a lot to help paginate and manage complex, often versioned books. So today we're going to be going over some of the basic management of the Flatplan. Automated pagination with rule sets and AutoLink, so you don't have to manually associate pages with specific folio slots, customizing sections with offsets and prefixes to manage more complex books, controlling page inheritance with parent and child versions for regionalization, and then using pagination information to drive workflow and file delivery. So, what I'm going to do here is, first off, just to show you how the basics of this work, we're going to go through what would be more manual, sort of how this process works. Then we're going to automate bits piece by piece. So to begin here, I'm going to create a new project. And what I'll do here, just to define and get the Flatplan up, is I'm going to enter in a page count. So I'm going to say my job is 32 pages. Click Save, and it's going to create the job. So as you can see now that my job came up, I have this Flatplan, this little storyboard area here that shows me all the 32 pages in my job. And if I upload a few pages, let me actually grab a few of these right here. One thing to note that I know that if you haven't played with the Flatplan before is, I think ES hides this by default. You have to go to, there's a layout menu up here which gives you three real options. Flatplan and list, only Flatplan, which shows you just the Flatplan, and then only list, which shows you the traditional ES view. I think it defaults to only list even if you have pages configured or the Flatplan configured in a job, so that's one of those things you can toggle as needed. You also have some options down here as far as filtering the list specifically. You have all, which shows you all the pages in the job. Not assigned would show you anything that's not assigned to the Flatplan. Assigned would show you anything that's assigned, and then there's a few more options as far as maybe I only want to see pages in the specific version or section I'm dealing with. In this case, I'm just going to go with not assigned. In this case, this would work like if you're coming from a Mistral background, it would work sort of like the clipboard did in Mistral, showing me pages. And if I wanted to manually paginate this, I can just drag and drop pages into the Flatplan wherever I want. If I wanted to paginate by basically saying I want to put a page on a specific area of the Flatplan, I can right-click, select Upload, and then basically pull in and upload a page to that area. So one of the things that's nice about the Flatplan view in ES is if I pull these up in a multi-page view, I'm going to select those and hit S to open them all up in dialog. The first page is always assumed, the first and back pages are always assumed to be the front and back cover, so they always show singularly. But if I go to other pages, it'll show me them as a spread. That looks a little goofy because my page sizes are pretty different there, but just random test files here. But it will show you your pages in a spread if they are laid out this way within the core body of your Flatplan. If I wanted to move pages around, I can toggle them to tweak. The other thing is if I decide I want to overwrite a page, so I take this one down here, if I drag this on top of page 2, it's going to swap them out, which is the default behavior here. I can decide if I choose, maybe I have a situation where I have 32 or 33 pages in here, and I don't want to have to repaginate everything and just swap one out. I want to move them all down one. What I can do is there are two other cursors I can select here. This one shifts everything to the right. This other one shifts everything to the left. So if I go in here and I drag this to page 2, it's going to move those other ones over. And the one for the right would do the same thing. If I moved here, it would move everything over one to the left. So that's one nice advantage over how this traditionally worked in Mistral is if you have to add one page to a book, it's not a huge deal. You don't have to go and manually move every page or re-upload to re-trigger that pagination. So a very handy feature there. Once you're happy with how the pagination is configured, you also have the ability to lock pages in place. So if I go up to Edit Lock, what will happen here is I can click this page, but I can't move it. It's basically locked into that position on the flat plan. This is one thing I know has caused a little confusion is the lock works differently than it did in Mistral. In Mistral, the idea was the lock kind of stuck a page into a position. So it wouldn't accept any new revises and you couldn't move it. In ES, that functionality has been split into different areas. So the way it works here is that lock makes it so I can't move the page. I can still upload revises if I wanted to. The way to restrict those, if I chose to, would be to go under Administration Rule Sets, and in whatever rule I'm using, Configure allows input file if before step, and select a step in there, so that once files progress to a certain point where they would be locked, then they wouldn't let you move it. So that's about the gist of how that would work. But this is a very manual process, as we saw here. We want to make this a little more efficient, especially if we have more standard sort of file names. So one of the good examples I have is and we're going to be dealing a lot with today, I have just some generic pages I built up. They're all color-coded. They have different section or names and whatever position they are in the section, just so if you see those as we go on in the demo, those aren't an icon in ES. Those are the actual pages. I just color-coded to make it a little easier to show what we've been working on. So what I would do is if I wanted to handle this pagination automatically, there's two steps. The first step is to set up a rule in my rule set, and I have one right here called Upload with Folio Name. So the gist of what this rule is, if I take a page like this, it's going to extract, if it can, a number or a number of digits before the first underscore and try and use that as the page number in this folio area down here and basically strip that out and say, okay, that's the folio that this is supposed to go on to. One thing that's worth noting in here is traditionally the way I've seen most people handle this sort of situation, and it's the way historically you had to do it in Twist back with older versions of Tickle, but typically how people would do it is have something like this, where you'd wind up having your folio name be number 4, and then having your document name be number 4 underscore number 5, and having to rebuild that document name based off of that regular expression. But there is a better way. ES does support nested regular expressions. So I have one set of brackets, one atom that's basically extracting the page number, and I have a second one nested around that that's extracting the whole file name, so I don't need to rebuild that again. It'll just pick it up on the fly. So that's the first part, is you need to grab that folio and assign a folio in the rule set. The second part is if I go into my workflow, and I'll go with, I'm using Wiffle Dialog, the just bare bones demo workflow that ships with ES, you have to place in an AutoLink step. And what the AutoLink step does is it basically takes, if there was a folio extracted from the file in the rule set, it takes that and allows you to basically place that on the flat plan if there's a matching position that's not already taken or locked. A few other options in here which we'll be delving into a little later that are worth knowing. The two main ones are first the lock position, and that will do the same as the edit lock feature I used earlier. The other one that can be useful sometimes is auto expand flat plan, And what that would do is, if I have a situation where it finds a folio name in a file, but it's larger than the number of pages in my book. So if I have a 32-page book, but my file is page 33, if that option is enabled, it would go ahead and create a page 33 and assume that I want that extra page in there, which could be very useful for if maybe you have maybe you typoed and made a book with 10 pages instead of 32. You don't want to have to go through and manually drag and drop some of those other pages in. That would just allow it to go ahead and automatically place all those in line. So what I'm going to do here is create a new book, 32 pages. Actually, let me make sure my rule is enabled here. So yeah, what we'll see is those pages, it was able to parse a folio out of the file name, and these pages are getting placed on the correct position within the flat plan. As far as that feature I mentioned earlier about auto expand, if I'd had a page 33, what this would do right now, since this isn't enabled in my workflow, is page 33 will just go to the clipboard. But if I did enable that other feature, it would create a page 33 up here for me, so I don't need to worry about that. So we're getting to situations a little more tenable as far as automation is concerned. But in all cases, there are some cases where if you're dealing with more of a magazine sort of product, for example, you have different sections. So you've got, for example, a body, and then you've also got cover pages, which you could run into a situation where your cover page 1 is fighting your body page 1. Body page 1 would technically need to be on page 3 in here, which then means there's kind of a 2-page offset on everything, which makes it a little more confusing to manage or deal with. What you can do in that sort of situation is there are some more complex features as far as configuring sections. So what we'll do here is, actually let me, we can use the same job, I'll just delete all these pages out of here. If we go under the version section area here, you can do a little more detailed configuration of the pagination for your flat plan. Since we defined the page count on that initial general tab, it automatically created a version called common. And that version common was configured to have 32 pages, which in most cases, if you're doing something fairly simple, that should cover it. What we can do in a scenario like this is instead of doing that and just defining the total page amount, you can also define length sections. And how this would work is I can essentially make a section for my cover. And I'll say I want a 4-page section here. And I'll have a body section that's 32 pages. So if I go ahead and create that, that would make a 36-page book with 4-page cover and 32-page body. A few other things in here just to make clear what this would be doing is there are these 4 folio fields here. What these are is folio 1 is essentially the page that the section starts on. Folio 4 is what it ends on. Folio 2 and folio 3 are in here so that you can split the section if needed. And how that works is I have a section here that's contiguous, so this section starts on page 3 and ends on page 34. Because I don't really need to do anything special in here for that because it's contiguous, I just have page 18 and page 19 as my folio 2 and folio 3. And that could be really any other page in the book. This could be page 4 and page 19 or page 4 and 5. If it's contiguous, those are just 2 numbers next to each other because you're opting not to split anywhere. For something like this cover here, what I have here is folio 1 is the first page, folio 2 is the second. So the first bit of that section is coming at the beginning of the book. Then there's a split. The section resumes at page 35 and continues on to page 36. So you can have a split in the middle. And You usually don't have to worry about this if you're using one of the predefined binding types within ES. The default perfect and saddle type listed in here will automatically configure some of those sections to wrap around. So if I change this, for example, to 8 pages, you'll see that my folio is automatically adjusted here. So folio 1's 1 to 4, the section goes from page 1 to 4, takes a split, and then continues from page 37 to 40. And if I toggle these around in the list as far as order, it will adjust those values. So I'm going to change that back to 4 right now. If I did want to customize these anymore, I could go into this custom area here and say maybe I wanted these all to go at the very beginning. So I could have page 1, 2, 3, 4, and that section will come at the very beginning. And then here I could have this body section be 5 to 36, and I can manually type whatever I want it into here. So you have a little more control over, maybe you don't want those sections nesting, like this assumes they would if you select the perfect and saddle binding type in here. So, but the one thing to watch out for if you do that is it's very important to make sure you don't have folio 2 and folio 3 equal to the same page, because that can cause some confusion under the system as far as page count is calculated. The other thing to watch out for is if you decide you don't want a section and you decide you're going to delete it, the plus button here adds a new section. So you would assume that that deletes it, but what really happens if you click the plus, it unlinks it. So if I go here to link, you'll see that that section exists in here. And that can be something you want in some cases. What I've usually seen those unlinked sections used for is, for some customers, they have different section arrangements that they might need to pull out at will to use for different kind of versions of a book or different projects within the same customer. So they would define different kind of pre-baked sections in here in their project template and then pick them, choose them at job creation time. The two things that you have to watch out for there is if you have two sections in the job with the same name, one linked and one unlinked, that can cause some problems as far as assigning pages to one of those specific sections. And treating it that way can also cause issues with the total page count in the job. Even though this is unlinked and it's not actively in my job, it still does apply towards my total page count. So I know we have a few customers who have jobs where they have a project workflow configured to wait until every page is in the project before, for example, it generates a digital edition or delivers all the files at the very end of the process. If you have something configured like this, and they kind of accidentally thought you deleted it, that process will be waiting for more pages than you'd planned, and that could cause a few roadblocks. If you did want to delete this, I'm just going to relink it for now because I do want that section. But if you did want to relink it, there will be an area over here I'll show you later where you can basically right-click and actually delete that section from the job. So if I go ahead and create this, what you'll see here is, now if I go to my flat plan, I have 36 pages in here instead of 32 I had earlier. But that still doesn't help me because my two cover pages, I want the beginning of the body to be page 1. So if I go back here and edit, there are these two extra options here, mapping mode and offset or prefix. The mapping mode gives you some extra options for how you would deal with these pages or kind of differentiate these sections from each other. And you can either choose an offset, which would be used to change the displayed page number to match what you would expect it to, or the prefix, and the prefix option allows you to put a prefix before a page number so that it specifies that it's part of a section pretty clearly within ES. So what I'll do here, for example, my body, I have two cover pages in front of it, so I'm going to add an offset of -2. What that means is this section starts on page 3. When it displays the page count in the flat plan, it's going to remove 2 and basically do a 2-page offset so that page displays as page 1. Additionally, what I'll do here is I'm going to add a prefix plus the section position for the cover, and I'll add the prefix of CV for cover. So what this means is the cover pages are going to show up as CV1, CV2, and then whatever they are in that section. And then the body will start with page 1 again. So now if I go back to my job here, you'll see that I have CV1, CV2. I have my 32 body pages, and then CV3 and CV4. The other option there, because I chose to label these with that prefix and then the section position, you could also do the project folio, which would make this CV1, CV2, CV35, and then CV36. So you have different options there for that folio name, depending on what you would make the most practical sense for your project. So, and if I go in here and I go under my, I need to refresh there before it shows. Yeah, sometimes you have to refresh before that'll show. You can also view individual sections, so I can see just the body or just the cover section, which now this is set up pretty nicely, but new challenge is how do I get pages into these CV slots and into these pages here? That would be done once again under the rule set. So if I go under my upload rules, I'm going to toggle in. I have two new rules in here. The first is this upload cover folio rule. And this is going to look for a file that has some number of digits in the front, an underscore, and then the word cover. And what it's going to do from there is it's going to take whatever digit is at the front of that file and add CV to it and put it on the folio with that number and CV in front of it. The second one in here is upload body folio. And what this is doing is it's looking for a page with the number of digits, an underscore, and then body and the name. And what that's going to do is there's a special piece of tickle code you have to put in down here. And basically what this is going to do is going to take that folio name, if it can find a page number in there, and it's going to add 2 to it to account for that offset. Even though that displays as page 1 in the body, it's still considered page 3 in the project, so you have to account for the offset that you've configured. So what I'm going to do is I just enabled both of those rules. So if I go back in here, and I have some pages already staged up for this, you'll see that I have a number of body and cover pages in here. And these are going to take a minute or two to start crunching in, but what you'll see is that the cover pages are going to land in the CV1 and CV2 slots, and the body pages are going to land in the positions that start with 1. And those page numbers should be correct to what is in the name. So yeah, for example, because this is technically page slot 5, it just displays as 3 because of the offset. But because of that little piece of tickle we put in our rule set, it does map to page 3 within the Flatplan here. So you can do some very complex configurations that way. So there are some other benefits to configuring a Flatplan like this as far as downstream work or other automation that you can take care of. One of the first that's a really good example is you can use it to rename files or drive kind of a transmit in the workflow. One good example of this is I have another project here. I'm going to dump a file and then I'll show you what it's doing under the hood. So let me grab a few files in here that don't have a page number. And since these don't have any page number in them, there's no real way for ES to know where to place them. But maybe you've got a customer that does like a lot of late-breaking work, or they prefer to do manual pagination because they're using the system as part of their creative process or in lieu of a storyboard. What you could do in here is I have a pretty simple workflow set up that there's 2 parts. There's a document workflow and a project workflow here. And what they're going to do is the document workflow here, the file is going to come in, it's going to generate a preview, it's going to wait for approval, and then once it's been approved, it's going to look to see, there's a few different variable values in here that it could look to see. So if I go to show context, object, then what I can see in here is there is a variable called, it's actually not on the Flatplan yet, but there's a variable here, folio, which will have the folio position that is in the project. So it'll have the page number, and then folio name would have the label, whatever the user sees. So that could be my CV2, that could be page 3. whatever it was set up to do. I do also have stuff in here for if I were using sections in this job, I could also grab section information. But what I'm going to be doing is looking at that. Yep.
This is Fred. I was just going to interrupt real quick because we did have a question that was pertaining to kind of what you're showing right now. And that question is, can you use folio information that's inside of a PDF file, so the pagination information inside of like a multi-page PDF, to place pages properly in the flat plan?
Yeah, and I think you probably can do that. There is a PDF split tool in ES. The one caution I do have with the one in ES is that it bases off of sequentially the pages in the PDF. It doesn't look at the actual page number label. So that would split off. If your PDF started at page 3, it would consider page 1.
One thing to mention is that in ES5 that has been fixed. So ES5 can split a PDF and recognize the page labeling in it.
Yep.
Otherwise, right now in ES4.5, you would have to use twist to get that information out, but we can do it with twist.
But yeah, basically you take the file, split it apart in twist, and then you could use that page number, append that to the single pages, and use that to place pages within the flat plan. So yes, that is doable. So as far as where I am right now in this, what I have this workflow set up to do is it's taking this file, it's going to look to see what if there's a folio name. If it's on the flat plan, add the folio position, add an underscore, and then add the user's file name after that. So if I go in here and let me just drag a few of these up to random pages here on my flat plan. So if I go ahead and validate these, I'll actually switch this to show all pages down here. What you're going to see is that's going to be renamed to 2_ magazine lorem ipsum. This one here, if I approve this, that's going to get renamed to 18 swatch test 2, which just happened. So right here I'm just using it to prepend the folio position and handle that pagination for maybe any other system I delivered to down the line. If you wanted to and you had a customer that used very non-formulaic file names, you could use this as kind of a forced rename step where you could have it, rather than just appending that folio position to the front of the file name, you could have it completely rename the file name to a some kind of formulaic file name, such as the page number underscore the version or section underscore the issue name that it was part of, so that you have a consistent file name for anything else you have to do downstream in your process. So that's one thing that can be incredibly useful. One other thing that this can be useful for, what a lot of our customers use a flat plan for, is it makes it very easy to wait until all pages are in before performing some large-scale project-related task. One example of this is I'm going to go ahead and create a simple project here. I have a workflow webinar wait on doc. I'm going to add myself as an approver here. And I'm going to add 6 pages in this job. And so what this is going to do is there's 2 parts to this. I'll upload the files and then we can walk through each of those. So the first part is this is the document workflow. The file comes in. It's using AutoLink to place it on the flat plan. There's a preview generation step to generate a thumbnail preview. Approval whiffle step that waits for user approval. Once the file has been approved, it uses a send event to communicate to the project workflow and say, hey, this document's been approved. The project workflow then waits until every file in the project has said that it's good to go. And then it sends out an event that says, okay, you can release this. Here I have this releasing just to a delivered milestone, but you could have this, for example, go to a digital delivery if you wanted to wait until every file came into the project and was approved before it transmitted. You could have it wait to do that for that pagination routine I just showed you, or what we have a lot of customers that use that for is to wait till all the pages have come into a project before dispatching to Twist to generate a PDF book or a digital edition. So the other half of this coin is the project workflow, which I'll show you up here. The project workflow just has two simple steps. It waits until the doc approved event has been triggered the number of times it matches the page count value in the job. The second is the send event here. Once all those pages have come in and have signaled to the project workflow that it's ready to roll, it'll send one right back, and those pages will proceed. So for example, here if I approve 5 out of these 6 pages, those are going to hit that event, but they haven't reached the page count value yet, so there's still one there. It's still waiting to send. Those files aren't going to hit that final delivered milestone until I approve this one right here. So I'll go ahead and approve that guy. And now that I did that, all those pages are going to go ahead and transmit. So you can see that those all, once everything in the project came in, it immediately took it and ran with it later on downstream. So one thing again to note there is you to be careful not to, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to get rid of a section, you have to make sure you actually delete it rather than unlink it. An unlinked section would count towards that page count, meaning that if I had another 6-page section in there that was hidden because it was unlinked, it would be waiting for 12 pages, so those 6 wouldn't have triggered that action. If I did actually want to delete this, what I could do a section, for example, is I can just right-click on it here in the left-hand pane and click delete. So that's the one last thing, because I know we're getting pretty tight on time here. The one last thing I'm going to show you today is versioning, and particularly more complex or nuanced versioning. I have actually under this other customer up here kind of a good example template set up. So we're going to go ahead and create a job. This is going to take a few minutes to crunch, so I'll send the files, and then while they're processing, we'll look at what's going on here. So let me grab all these. Let those start crunching into ES. So the way this is set up in this job is I have maybe as an example a complex versioned news magazine, and I have 3 sections or 3 versions defined in here. There's 3 different versions of my magazine for different markets. There's a newsstand version, there's a subscription version, and there's a Canada version. And if I crack any of these open and look under the hood, they're pretty simple. I have over here, basically, I just configured one link section in here. You can do it in most cases by defining a version total page amount, but link sections, for a few reasons in this case, gives me a little more control and a little more flexibility about how I view this in the interface. So that looks good for that. Subscriptions set up pretty much the same way. I do have a difference in newsstand, because if I just created 3 versions like that Canadian version I just showed and just left them as is, you'd have 3 completely separate versions. Instead, what I'm doing here is, under Newsstand, maybe Newsstand is my master version. Newsstand is ultimately my core product. And then I have Canadian and subscription versions, and maybe have Canada has a few pages that are different. Subscription has a few pages that are different. The way I have this configured in here is I have this version children tab. I have the Canadian version and the subscription version listed as version children to the newsstand parent. So ultimately what that means is if I go into my job, I'll refresh, so we'll see how this is doing here. That looks good. So off the bat, you'll see that we have these little triangle icons here. I'm looking at the project as a whole. That means there are versions in this project with different copies of that page. So if I click on the Folio 2 position, you'll see that I have Canada subscription and newsstand versions of that. And I can interact with these using any of these normal menus up here like I would in this little mini window here. But if I also go over here to the sections area, actually got to refresh again. It doesn't always show up right away when you create it. You got to refresh the page fresh sometimes. There is a newsstand version here. Under newsstand, there's a newsstand section, and there are also Canada and subscription versions with their own sections underneath. That's one of the reasons I created this section specifically, is because it's a little easier to get some more granular control there. So I can also view the sections just straight up down here since I created those. So if I look at Newsstand, for example, you'll see Newsstand, that's my master version. So every page in here is a Newsstand page. If I go to my subscription version, anytime there is a subscription version specific page, it's going to be using that. If it doesn't have one, it's going to be using my Newsstand version as a fill-in. And the same goes for Canada here, is if I don't have a specific Canadian version page, it's going to pull in the Newsstand version as a stand-in. And that'll even hold in dialog here. And if I decide, for example, I need a specific Canadian page here for page 3, I can upload that later and that'll supersede the Newsstand version for that page 3. This is really useful too, because for revisions, if I have a Canada-specific version, if I have to upload a revision for just a generic Newsstand version of that page, it's not going to override this Canada version. So very helpful there for getting into more complex publications. The one thing I did test right before the webinar, which is actually pretty cool, is this does support nesting child versions. And I created a job to showcase that. Is if I go into my version section in this job here, I have a Newsstand version that has subscription as a child version. And if I go into subscription, that has Canada in a child version. So if I were to open up this job and actually look into the side area here, you'll see now all three of those are nested within each other. And the upshot of this is, again, if I go to Newsstand, I see everything in Newsstand is listed here. If I go to subscription, you'll see that it's using anything in the subscription version if it has it. If not, it's using the Newsstand. And then lastly, if I go into Canada, then what's happening here is it's using the Canadian-specific version if it has it. If it doesn't have a Canada-specific version, it's pulling the subscription one. If it doesn't have a subscription one, it's pulling the Newsstand as a last resort. So you can do some very powerful, you can handle some very complex versioning situations like this. But that's about the gist of my presentation. We have any questions?
Thanks, Alex. We have a couple. Mike, you want to go?
Yeah, we got a couple here, Alex. Actually, one of them was right from this last part, and you might have shown this, but someone asked what were those triangular icons that showed up in your flat plan?
That's a good question. Yeah, the triangle icon is pretty notorious. If I go to view this project at the initial level, compared to like a normal project, you'd see your normal flat plan here. The triangle icons here, because we're viewing the project as an overview, we're not viewing any specific version. So for some of these pages, it's showing us there's only one page for page 8. Some of these others, for example, there's 2 versions of that page for some of these other slots. So ultimately that's what it's showing me is you have version content here. If I don't want to see those, what I can do is I can either go into the specific versions here. I get a little smaller icon. If I go directly into the Newsstand version, it'll still show me that. Or I can go and just view the sections directly so that I don't see those there and I can just see the Newsstand pages as they were without the triangles in the way.
Okay, we got a couple more. One, it's a pretty simple one. The question was, when you defined the sections and versions earlier, you did it all manually. Can these be pre-configured in a project template so you don't have to set them up for each job?
Yes, I can. I actually have for the project template configured for my Forms Inc. customer up here. That is configured, so if I go ahead and create a new project in here, I automatically have these 3 versions configured with Newsstand and the 2 version children. That's actually why, and you do have to be careful about it, but that's why we do have a few customers that will create and then unlink sections so that they can go and have those predefined and then pull in the section they need for a job, only if they're not relying on the total page count for that job. You can also create these based off of JDF information. So if you do a JDF job import, dumping a JDF into a hot folder, you can have that automatically create versions or sections and basically set up that pagination for your project.
Okay, we have two more quick ones. One of them is a question that's based on the routine you did earlier, at least that's the way I understand it. The routine where you rename the pages, so it kind of gave the folio number, right?
Yep.
So the question is, after you've renamed those, if somebody subsequently moved one of those pages to another page slot, can ES properly name the file when it gets ultimately released so that new folio number can be associated with it?
Yep, and that's a very good point there. The way I did that was kind of a simpler workflow because I just had in my workflow here, let me pull up webinar renamer, because I just did it in a documents up here, so I just renamed it to the folio name and then the current user file name. What I could have done is I think to do this you have to set that as metadata using the context.set metadata command, but basically which in a program link. But what you could do then is you set up your digital delivery and output channels. You have the ability in here to specify a file name. So you can have the workflow set metadata at some point right before the digital delivery occurs that says, okay, this is what file name I'm going to use, and at the very end when it transmits, it accesses that, whatever current folio position is at, and names the file at the time of transmit. And this actually does bring up one other good point that I was going to mention that kind of slipped my mind earlier. There is a point of caution as far as some of these variables. If I go into show context here, the folio name shows you for all your versions in your project what that page is, what that page is on. And one of the issues that you can run into is, because there is a variant thing here that tells you which sections you have in the job. As of now, there's no way to really link up in a more complex scenario. If you had this on page 8 in one version and page 25 in another version, there's no easy way to link up and name the file at time of transmit based on its page number within a specific version. That being said, Dalim is working on a way to do that, and it should be released pretty soon, I'm thinking. But essentially what they'll be doing is adding 2 extra variables in here so that you have basically a linked up copy of the folio linked up to the version, its respective version, and then the folio name linked up to its respective version so that you can say, okay, that's on page 2 in the candidate version.
Yeah. One comment on the renaming function as well, I guess what Mike was talking about is if you do move pages in the Flatplan and you want to have them named properly, after a move, you can program like a user action to run the same kind of workflow that Alex was just showing with the document step in it to rename the file based on the current information.
Yep, and if you're also in a bind too, there is always a rename function up here where you can bring up to manually just rename something too if you needed.
Last question. The pages that you've worked with in your examples are all single pages. Can you submit a spread and have it span 2 pages in the Flatplan?
The way ES works, it wouldn't let you specifically have a page span, but what you can do is if you're using Twist or eTwist, you could have it basically take that page and split it using like a create PGS tool, and then have those 2 pages, 2 split pages pulled in and used. If you did put in a spread that would get associated with one of these pages, as far as where I've seen that done before is for imposition within ES, you could have the spread uploaded and associated with 2 different pages in here, and then use offsets at the imposition level to
There's actually
well, actually, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there is a routine you can run
in double
your
page
document workflow that actually says it's a double page spread and it will span the 2 pages without splitting it. it's one that is used fairly infrequently, but that's why I don't remember what it is. But it
Yeah,
comes,
I don't remember off. I know it's like is double page, and it
yeah, it's
will
something like
span the
that.
2 pages. But yeah, we can
Gotcha. Yeah,
look that up. Yeah.
yeah, that vaguely is coming back to me now that you mention it.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, the fact is, I think a lot of times, even if you place a double, you end up splitting it after the fact. So
Yeah.
it's
Typically,
not
most
the
people
worst
want it
idea.
split. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the worst idea to split it up front, but you
Right.
can do it either way.
Sure.
And that's the last of the questions.
So, yep, I think we're good here for now. So, if you guys, we don't quite have anything set up for next month yet. We're probably going to be doing something on ES5, which was just
More than
released by.
Yeah, more than likely it'll be ES5 with ArcAware and the archiving module.
Sure. So when we have more information, that'll always be on our site at blanchardsystems.com/events. So hope to see you there. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Good job.